variation 29. This variation is very, very similar to variation 10 because it also combines spiccato with slurs, and the slurs are alternately on a down bow and on an up bow. So if this is fairly new for you, or if you find the alternating slurs with down and up bow difficult, take the time to go back to variation 10 to really master that part of the technique. I'll have the link in the description, because this variation is a bit more complicated. He gets more difficult as he goes along through the 40 variations. So here we have a more complicated, more difficult left hand. The slurs alternate quicker after each other, and we have more string crossings. Plus, we are supposed to do this variation in two ways. We're supposed to do it at the frog and mezzo forte, and we're supposed to do it in the middle in piano. So you should have well mastered variation 10 before you move on to this variation. The first thing you should do with this variation is to give yourself all the time you need to secure the left hand. The left hand is not very easy in this variation. Just like the bow technique gets more difficult as you move through the 40 variations, so does the left hand. And we're in G sharp minor, which is not exactly the most comfortable key on the violin. Plus we're in first position and half position. Half position is also always uncomfortable. And your left hand has to be secure before you can start adding the bow technique, because you need to be able to concentrate on the bow, and the fingers of your left hand have to follow the bow, not the other way around. You don't have time in spiccato with slurs to wait for the left hand to be in place. And I found when I was practicing this that very often why something didn't work was because my left hand just wasn't fast enough or wasn't in place enough. So start off with making it as easy as you can for yourself, just on the string up and down bow, slowly. I also noticed that I found it difficult remembering the fingerings, because they are also fairly complicated, because sometimes you have the A sharp with the fourth finger, and straight afterwards you have it with the first finger, and you keep on having to remember when to do what, or at least that was in my case, that was the case. So I spent quite a lot of time just practicing for the left hand. Next step, when you feel a bit more comfortable with what you're supposed to do with the left hand, practice it slurring too. Practice the whole variation that way. And then practice it two down and up, and then one slur, and then two up and down, and then one slur. That way, with the direction, you're already doing what you're supposed to do. You're just not doing it spiccato, you're doing it on the string, and that gives you a bit more time. You can do it slower. Practice that first at a very comfortable speed that you do not find challenging, and once you can do that, challenge yourself and bring it up to speed. So give yourself enough time to build up the speed of the left hand and the security of the left hand before you go into any of the actual spiccato bow technique. One thing I would like to mention, for the last two bars you have that's a bit uncomfortable. Put your third finger down for the F double sharp on both D and A string already, because you won't be able to move it over to the A string fast enough when you're playing it in tempo. So put your finger on D and A string there already, so that you have it down as a fifth. So that it's there already. That was one of the things I kept on having to remember because it didn't work out when I didn't remember. Now, as a preparation exercise for the bow, I would recommend making it very easy for yourself for the left hand so that you can concentrate on the bow. What I did a lot was something like this. That way it's easy for the left hand, but I'm already doing the bowing I'm supposed to do. Like I said, if you've practiced and mastered variation 10, you can do spiccato combined with slurs already. You just have to be able to teach yourself to do it in this variation. Here also already practice it in both ways. Down the frog, mezzo forte. Like that. At the frog you have the advantage that you have a lot of control in the bow, and you also have the bow bouncing quite a lot higher. The next step is to do the same bowing in the middle or very slightly below the middle in piano. Now what you do different is everything becomes smaller. You use less bow and you don't jump very high. In fact, I try to jump as low as possible because you get more control and it sounds better. And the movement from your right hand is also so small that it is hardly visible. I'll show you both next to each other. If you have here at the bottom, and in piano it's so basically the movement is the same, it's just much, much smaller. And the biggest thing which helped me was to just think small, everything small, very little bow, not to jump very high, and the movements here are the same, but very small. When you start practicing this variation, start by practicing it very slowly at the frog. The one advantage we have at the frog is that we can play slowly, even spiccato, and spiccato combined with slurs, because we have a lot of bow control down here. Remember the finger action, very important, because you have to do it at the frog, and even when you do it in the middle, when it's all small, the movements are still there, they're just very small and not very visible. But start off by giving yourself plenty of time and practicing it slowly. Slow enough that you really feel in control of everything. Let the bow fall on the string for the slur. Down here it won't bounce, the bow is too heavy for it to bounce. If you let it fall too much, it will just scratch a little bit. That was a huge exaggeration, but that's about the worst thing which can happen. Don't worry about that because speed will take care of that. Once you play it a little bit faster, that won't happen. But get a feel for letting the bow fall, dropping it, because that's what stops it from bouncing, because you don't want it to bounce in the slur. So you can get quite a good feeling for it at a slow tempo if you let the bow fall on the string. For the up bow, it helps to give a bit of a kick. Basically, you slightly increase the speed of the bow to stop it from bouncing on the up bow. The bouncing is not much of an issue down here because the bow is too heavy, it won't bounce. But that does become an issue when you move away from the frog, and particularly when you're in the middle of the bow. So it helps to do a little bit of a kick for the up bow. Next step is to speed it up a little bit. And then speed it up further. Now to play it piano in the middle, you can't do it that slow because the bow will bounce. If I try to do it very slowly, I can't really control, especially the up bow slur, very well. It's not very helpful. You have to take a moderate tempo to practice it in the middle. Do not bounce very high, just enough to get the articulation you want, no higher. Don't use much bow. And remember, the finger action movements are still there, but they also become very small and hardly visible. Very, very small, everything very small. The reason why it's a good idea to practice it piano, and why you're also supposed to do it piano, is in orchestra. You have all sorts of bowings, very often spiccato and slurs combined, and sometimes you have to do them forte and sometimes you have to do them piano. And now piano in an orchestra, where you have a whole section doing it, you have to play very, very, very soft for the whole section of, say, 10 people to still be very, very piano. So that's why it's a good idea to practice this in piano and make sure it really is very, very soft, because that's actually the more difficult bowing, to get that precise. And practice it as slow as you can without it being so slow that it gets difficult again. I found a sort of a moderate tempo quite good. And as you speed up, make sure that you bounce even less high. Okay, that's variation 29. Next video I'll do the sub variations because they bring their own challenges. This one is not easy. In fact, all of the ones coming now are not easy. So I hope you have patience for this one and good luck with it. Any questions, let me know in the comments.